ACLU seeks class action on behalf of Georgian deaf prisoners denied communication access. Prison and probation offices failed to provide effective communication to deaf people, leading to longer sentences, harsher punishments, and high rates of recidivism. MACON, Georgia. The American Civil Liberties Union and the ACLU of Georgia filed a motion in federal court to pursue a class action lawsuit on behalf of deaf and hard of hearing people imprisoned in and released from the Georgia Department of Corrections. The proposed complaint highlights how prison, probation, and parole systems fail deaf prisoners, leading deaf people to go to prison more often, stay longer, and return more quickly. Prison administrators do not provide sign language interpretation to convey prison rules, to take classes required for release, or to participate in religious, medical, or vocational meetings. In addition, the prison system does not provide visual or tactile alerts for daily or emergency events. The prison system then punishes deaf people for violating the rules, not responding to verbal commands, and not taking required classes. All of these were inaccessible to them. Talila Lewis, the volunteer director of Helping Educate to Advance the Rights of Deaf Communities, or HEARD, stated this: American Sign Language and English are entirely different languages, complete with their own grammar, syntax, and structure. Georgia's decades-long failure to provide qualified interpreters for imprisoned and returned people whose first or only language is ASL makes it impossible for them to access essential information about their cases, mandatory classes, prison policies and procedures, health and mental health care, parole and probation requirements, and to receive support after experiencing physical or sexual assault. After serving their sentences, previously incarcerated deaf people do not have access to information about the conditions of their release, probation guidelines, or instructions from their probation officers. Consequently, deaf people are at greater risk of recidivism simply because the system is designed to prevent them from successfully reintegrating into society. This perpetuates a cycle of incarceration targeting people with disabilities. The complaint also illustrates the human toll that deprivation has on imprisoned deaf people. Without interpreters or aides, the Georgia Department of Corrections, inmates miss meals, showers, important announcements, and medication because they are announced using only oral cues. They are unable to understand appointments with healthcare and mental health therapy sessions and communication related to other life-threatening health conditions. With no video phone to communicate with family, deaf prisoners cannot maintain community ties and have a greater difficulty reintegrating into society than their hearing and non-disabled peers. Susan Misner, director of the ACLU Disability Rights Program, said, "We are enormously grateful to HEARD for its years of work evaluating the stories of incarcerated deaf people and leading us to this case. All the deaf people we are in contact with had been denied their rights to communicate with their attorneys, with their families, with medical personnel, and with parole and probation officers. As a result, they have longer sentences, higher recidivism, and we believe high rates of being wrongfully incarcerated. Deaf people are a clear example of how the criminal legal system fails to accommodate people with disabilities. Sean Young, legal director of the ACLU of Georgia, said, "Deaf individuals are hamstrung throughout the entire incarceration process, lacking proper communication access during arrest, trials, and sentencing hearings. Unable to properly understand the charges being brought against them and provided inadequate legal representation, they are often served with overly punitive sentences. The system sets them up to fail." The complaint alleges that the Georgia Department of Corrections is violating the Americans with Disabilities Act, the Rehabilitation Act, and the United States Constitution. It was filed in the United States District Court for the Middle District of Georgia. The press release can be viewed online here.